Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the City's Planning Commission here on this wonderful Thursday, July 6th. A couple things I'll just reiterate quick for those of you that weren't eagerly attentive to that guy on the TV right before this. If you could please make sure that all your cell phones are silenced, that would be great. And also, as we go through this evening, we do want to hear from you. That's why this meeting is set up for public input. And just with that, I would remind everyone that we want to limit an individual person's testimony to 5 minutes. And also, please be sure that you're presenting new information that has not already been presented to the commissioners. So with that, we'll go ahead and get rolling. Denise.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item 1, approval of June 7, 2017 minutes of regular meeting. Item 2, June plats. Item 3, 6687 2017, rezone from the AG Agriculture District to the RD1 Twin Home Residential Suburban District located at 4000 South Ellis Road. Item 4, 6728 2017, rezone from the AG Agriculture District to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District located south of East Madison Street and east of North 6 Mile Road. Item 5, 6747 2017, rezone from the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar Districts to the C2 Commercial and Neighborhood and Streetcar District located at 1320 South Minnesota Avenue. Item 6, 6832 2017, rezone from the RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban District to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District located at 1806 East Mulberry Street. Item 7, 6912 2017, rezone from the LW Live Work District to the O Office and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District located north of West 57th Street and I-229. Item 8, 6937 2017, rezone from the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District to the I-1 Light Industrial District for allowed forms located at 5509 North Quarry Avenue. Item 9, 6938 2017, rezone from the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density and O Office Districts to the LW Live Work District for allowed forms located at 3810 North Career Avenue. Item 10, 6963 2017, rezone from the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density District to the LW Live Work District for allowed forms located at 2601 East 8th Street. Item 11, 6729 2017, preliminary subdivision plan for Willow Ridge 3 addition located south of East Madison Street and east of North 6 Mile Road. Item 12, 6868 2017, preliminary subdivision plan for Springdale addition located north of West 85th Street and east of South Minnesota Avenue.
Thank you, Denise. Is there anyone on the commission that objects to items number 1 through 12 being on the consent agenda? Is there anyone in the audience with any objection to items number 1 through 12 being present on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will look for, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Paul Cheddar of 320 West 25th, and I object to item 5, 6747 2017.
Okay. Note that we will move item number 5 to the regular agenda.
Yes, that's correct.
Any other comments? Thank you.
I can wait for my comments till later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other input from the audience on items number 1 through 12? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. I'll also need a motion to amend by moving item number 5 to the regular agenda.
So moved. Second.
And a motion and a second to amend, moving item number 5 to the regular agenda. All in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, and now a motion to approve, or we have a motion and a second on the agenda, amended for item number 5. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, the consent agenda, with the exception of item number 5, has been approved. If you are here in the audience for one of those items, you are free to go at this time. And I will need a motion to approve the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second approving the regular agenda. All in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Regular agenda is approved. Denise.
Item 5, 6747-2017, rezoned from the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar Districts to the C2 Commercial and Neighborhood and Streetcar District located at 1320 South Minnesota Avenue.
Good evening, Diane DeCoyer with planning staff. The project before you is Sherman property rezone. The building that exists on this property is currently zoned as C2. To the rear of the property is really what is parking, and it has been zoned as RT1, which is residential. So right now, it's a non-conforming form. They're rezoning that to tie the parcel together with the building as well. There's a new owner and developer for it, so he is also looking to update the planning, the parking for that area. It's approximately just a half an acre for the C2 rezone. There is residential to the rear, which fronts on South Dakota Avenue. They would be required to provide some buffer yards between the parking area and the single family there, and they'll have to look at that with an alternative buffer yard plan at a later date if they're not able to meet the requirements. Staff felt that the application is consistent with the Shapes Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan and does recommend approval for rezone. And the owner is here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Diane. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, Diane, can you talk a little bit about the buffer yards that would be required? The
Yes.
B and the C, just what they are?
Let's take a look here, assuming I've got it on. There's a level B buffer yard that is required to the south, up against West 22nd Street because of the adjacency to the RD1 across the street there. And there's a level C buffer yard required to the east, adjacent to those RT1 homes.
And what does that mean? Can you give the audience a little bit more?
Yeah, the level B is a 15-foot buffer yard. I don't have it in front of me. I think that's 20 units of landscaping per 100 lineal feet. The little bit of a tricky part on the east side where the level C is required for a 30-foot buffer yard is that there's a residence. You can see it on the aerial. Maybe you can point that out. The property there has a garage that actually enters their site from this commercial parking lot. So there'll have to be some kind of an easement agreement between the property owner at 1320 and then that residential unit. They would not be able to meet their buffer yard requirement at that location, which is why they're going to have to go either to Board of Adjustment for a variance or come up with an alternative buffer yard plan. So they would have to come back to see you at a later point if they don't go forward with a variance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Diane, is there any buffering in that area now with the permit
No,
use?
no. As you can see on that south piece, that is actually grass as it exists that had been part of the historic district there to the east and was recently just approved by Historic Preservation that that could be taken out of the district, which is why the applicant is including that for the rezone, to be able to expand their parking as well into that area.
And to get their permission on the use of that access, would that be part of the process of applying for their, what do you call it, modified plan?
For the homeowner to be able to access the garage, no, that is something that the property owners would have to work out together.
Okay, so it's provided now, but it wouldn't necessarily
It's provided now, but because of being able to bring that up to a C2, and based on the form and the requirement for a buffer yard, yeah, they'll have to get that resolved. They can always continue to park there, but they'll have to make some adjustments to the requirement of the buffer yard.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Diane. Is the applicant here this evening? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Dan Brentro, 1201 West Russell Street.
Add, Dan?
What's that?
Anything to add?
No, I guess I've got two friends and colleagues here. Paul Cheddar is the person who objected. I asked him to sit next to me to figure out what his concerns are, and I would actually like to yield the floor to him so he can address whatever his concerns are and we can respond to those. I can tell you as well that that house that has the garage on the back of it is also owned by a friend and colleague of mine named Bob Trzynka. He's not here tonight. He's in favor of the proposal, excited that we're going to be doing something to renovate that building and make it look nicer. I don't think we're going to have any problems coming to an agreement on access. They already have an easement by prescription. It's not written down anywhere, but you know, as an attorney, I can tell you I can't just shut him off from his garage, and I have no plans to. So there is on the northeast corner, if you look at that drawing there, you see that grassy part. That's another existing buffer. I don't know if Diane mentioned that, but there's a 5 or 6 foot brick wall that surrounds that parking lot, and so that grassy area already is sort of a type of buffer away from the rest of that. To the north is a commercial garage and commercial parking lot and another commercial retail building. And then that southern piece in the dark black line there abutting 22nd Street was a home that burned a few years ago. It was in the historic district. I don't think the home itself had any particular historic characteristics. It just happened to be in that area. And so what we're attempting to do is create essentially an alley that allows egress to 22nd Street and 21st Street, parking for the building. The rezone was just the discovery that this is, by some happenstance, already zoned residential, but it's been used as a parking lot for 30 or 40 years. So we're just trying to clean up the diagrams. So I'll let Paul address his concerns, and then maybe I can respond to his.
Sure, just 1 second, please, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Appreciate it. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thanks.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on item number 5?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Paul Cheddar, 320 West 25th. I live at the corner of 25th Street and Dakota Avenue, about 3-4 blocks south of the property in question. And my concerns aren't with the plan for the building. I endorse investment in the inner part of our community. My concern is with the rezoning of that parking lot piece. I understand it may be a non-conforming use. My concerns are not with their intended use of the property, but the next owner or the third owner from now, when they decide they can fit a Scooter's coffee shop or other commercial type use into that property, and that we as a city stand up against and resist commercial uses leaking further east off of Minnesota Avenue onto Dakota Avenue. So for that reason, I think you can approve the proposal tonight, but carve out and not approve the rezone for that particular piece of property. So thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cheddar? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 5? Seeing none, I will look for commission action.
Motion to approve?
Got a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to approve and a second. Any discussion?
I think always when we can clean up these kinds of odd situations, it's always a better thing for planning, and it allows us to really understand what that function really is. The reality of breaking out a parking lot and turning it back to residential isn't realistic in this case, so I think it makes sense to go ahead and change it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, taking into account Mr. Cheddar's concern, we can add stipulations to rezones, and I think we've done this in the past, that the only use could be parking. Is there, first of all, I just want to clarify and make sure, yes, we can do that, and two, what the wording would be if we were to amend that, and then to ask the applicant if that is something he was comfortable with. So we'll start with that. Is that something you would be comfortable with?
So the problem with that is that one of the elements of our building design has a portion of the building canopy anchored into the ground right on the other side of that black line. So no, that wouldn't work. We thought of that, and that's, I think, one of the reasons we wanted to make sure we got this cleaned up, and I'm now remembering that. So,
Okay, thanks. And forget my last two questions.
Yeah. I have a question of similar type. What is the permitting process and a subsequent development, as was brought up, as far as some other type of use in the future? What would be involved in the permitting process?
Based on the current condition of the building here, they're already fairly tight on parking. If something like a scooters or some other building might come in, that would have to be parceled off separately. It just would not work. They would constrain the parking for the existing building. They probably wouldn't be able to provide the parking or even drive-through access for something like that might come forward, so it would not be approved.
Okay. So it constrains it basically for what it's going to be used for?
No, they would be able to provide the parking in the area that they're shown for the rezone.
Right.
If another building were to come in, it would then constrain or take away parking from the existing building, and they can't afford to lose any parking stalls. We've been working with them on this for a little bit, so I'm familiar with the plan.
Not to interject a thought, but not going into the future, maybe the concern is if that whole block was C2 and became one large property completely raised and redeveloped, then they would be subject to buffer yards irregardless of a potential variance they might get for this purpose.
Those homes on Dakota Avenue, I can tell you as the liaison for preservation, it would never get approved by the board to be able to raise those homes. Several of those are contributing to the historic district. And even if our board were to approve something like that, the State Historic Preservation Office would not, so.
Correct, going east. I was talking going west, if they wanted to start over with a blank slate and then redevelop that block to the west.
Sure.
Then it would be subject to C2 buffer yards irregardless of any variance
Yes, correct.
that comes out, or easement for the one house for this parking scenario. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for Diane? Getting a good workout tonight. All right, any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate Mr. Cheddar's concern. I think in this instance it pretty well takes care of itself, and he didn't seem like he was opposed to this specific one. He was more talking about future opposition to encroachment into the neighborhood, which I don't think we will see, at least in this block.
Very good.
I would agree with that for the same reasons that he's identified.
Very good then. There's a motion and a second. We've had good discussion. All in favor of item number 5, please signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, same sign. Item number 5 is approved.
Pardon me. Item 13, 6219-2017 rezone from the AG Agriculture District to the LW Live Work District for allowed forms located north of East 6th Street and east of North Bonson Avenue.
The applicant and owner for this rezone is Lois and Kelly Brown. They have a representative, Arlie Brendy, that is here with them tonight as well. The property is located north of East 6th Street and east of North Bonson Avenue. The 6-acre site is currently zoned as agriculture, and the owner is requesting to rezone to LW or Live Work. But the owners do not have a buyer or proposed development at this time. The request is to rezone so that the property owners can sell the property to a prospective developer. Live Work provides for a variety of forms and uses. I'm going to just identify those, especially for those in the audience. The primary forms for Live Work are BCF1, which is a business and community small facility, MD2, which is a multiple dwelling moderate density. The secondary forms are MD1, multiple dwelling low density, AD1, attached dwelling twin home, AD2, attached dwelling 4-unit townhomes, AD3, attached dwelling 8-unit townhomes, RE1, which is limited retail, NF1 and NF2, neighborhood facilities, UT1 and UT2, which are basic and tower utilities. The property is unique with mature. What happened to our other? Okay, sorry about that. There's the aerial. The property is unique with mature trees to the north and east that were originally planted by Lois Brown's father. The site also contains some outbuildings for maintenance of the property and the owner's horses. Surrounding the site is Annie Sullivan Elementary School to the north, Kenny Anderson Park to the east, the Redwood Oak Estates apartments and twin homes to the west, and single-family residential to the south across East 6th Street. Because the applicant does not have a development plan for review for the rezone, staff has prepared a concept plan for discussion purposes only. The intent here is to show possibilities of what could be developed on the site. The plan also shows the possibility of maintaining some of the mature trees at the center of the site, as well as a unique stone building that exists. The concept plan suggests a pond to the south of the site for stormwater detention and realignment of North Bonson Avenue at East 6th Street and North Locust Avenue. Last year, a developer came forward with a proposed plan to rezone and develop 112 apartment units. Although it was approved by Planning Commission prior to it going to City Council, there was a great deal of concern and discussion with the neighbors that occurred, and the developer withdrew their petition. Staff has met several times in the past few months with the Oakview Neighborhood Association regarding this rezone, and they are here tonight to state their support of the rezone with staff recommendations. Because Live Work is intended to provide for more than one form in the same zoning district, and because a specific development plan has not been provided at this time, staff is recommending approval of this rezone with the following conditions. Number 1, for land use, multifamily housing will be a maximum number of 96 units for senior housing or 72 units for non-senior housing. The limitation on multifamily is so that the rest of the site can be developed for commercial or retail as a mixed-use development. Number 2, drainage. Prior to issuance of a building permit, a stormwater management plan will be approved by the City Engineering Department for required drainage improvement of the property. Number 3, traffic impact. Prior to issuance of a building permit, a traffic and pedestrian plan will be required for approval by the City Engineering Department. Prior to development, the city will work with property owners to acquire right-of-way and construct the North Bonson Avenue and East 6th Street alignment to align across the street there to Locust Avenue. I can answer any questions you might have. There are quite a few people in the audience with the neighbors and also the owner's representative that I'm sure will want to speak tonight as well.
Very good. Thank you, Diane. Commissioners, any questions for staff at this point?
Diana, I just want to confirm, this could only be a maximum of 2 stories, correct? In live work?
For live work, based on, for residential, it could be, if it's the multifamily, but it can also be a BCF 1 form that would allow the 3 stories.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Diane. Is the applicant here this evening? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Arlie Brendy. I work at Brendy and Metter's Law Office at 110 North Phillips here in Sioux Falls. I've been friends with Lois and Kelly Brown since we finished high school about 50 years ago. And I've been their lawyer for several years, and they asked me to make a few comments on their behalf tonight to you. The staff report, we understand it, and I think you've been briefed on it and have read it, was approved with certain restrictions. Last year, this board approved RA1 and RA2 unanimously for low and medium density residential. The Planning Commission report from last year talked about all of that, and then at the end of the report, it said the proposed zoning meets the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. This parcel is located on a minor arterial, North Monson, and surrounded by multifamily and elementary school in the park. Recommendation, because the subject application is consistent with Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, staff recommends approval of this rezoning, which you did unanimously. An offer was made, and a developer made the proposal. There was discussion with the neighbors, and there was no consensus, and the developer said, I don't want to get involved in a fight with anyone. I'm withdrawing my offer to purchase this property, which the Browns had had for sale for 4 or 5 years with no zoning other than agricultural. For the last year then, we've been talking about what's the best going forward for this piece of property that the Browns have lived on for between 3 and 4 decades. We have no buyer. No one wants to make an offer until they are able to determine what the zoning is going to be. No one wants to go through what the Lloyd property people felt that they went through, didn't want to make enemies, would like to have the boundaries set up for what they do for the development. There's a lot of uses that are available. My search of the internet tells me that East 6th Street has a traffic count now of 10,400 vehicles a day. And then Bonson, on the west edge of the Brown property, has a traffic count of about 1,100 per day. In perspective, East 10th Street's got 25,000. Negotiations are going on now with the city to run 6th Street east, not just to where it ends now, but all the way to what will be Highway 100. It's obvious the purpose is to take some traffic off of 41st Street, to take some traffic off of 26th Street, and to divide it up. And I don't know what the ultimate count would be for traffic, but if it's at 10,400 now, does it go to 13,000, 14,000, 15,000? What we're asking you to do here is to approve a less dense usage as alternative, but we're asking you not to put the restriction of X amount of apartments or X amount of elderly or handicap use. The site plan that was presented to you is not one that was drawn by the Browns. We've talked to commercial realtors, and they do not believe that that will work. But no one is willing to spend the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to develop a plan and make an offer until they know what the parameters are. The Center for Active Generations is not interested. They want to be closer to commercial uses for their people. The Oak View community organization has been vocal about not wanting the apartments that Craig Lloyd had proposed to put in, or Lloyd Properties had proposed to put in. So we're here to ask you to approve Live Work for what it was designed to be, because I don't see any precedent for a limitation on a zoning application and eventual practicality. As you look at the aerial, the homes south of 6th Street are, in my mind, much more affected by 10,400 to 15,000 cars a day on 6th Street, and they're much more affected by the jut between Locust and Bonson, which, if a deal can be made with the city and approved by the city council, we solve a traffic problem. Of course, we add more cars to the count, but any development's going to add more, whether it have been commercial, residential, or church, or otherwise. We have 2 rows of beautiful trees on the north side and the west side, although that's just buffering the school and the playgrounds and ultimately Washington High School to the far east. I think America was founded on a compromise between a property owner's rights and that for the general welfare of the public. But in my mind, with 70 members or 71 members in the I think it's called Shape Oak View organization, none of them, with the exception of a twin home and 3 single-family homes, are adjacent to this property. There's 10 acres of live work farther east on 6th Street that was surrendered by the owners, I believe, last year. Live work then, if this were to pass as a traditional live work, would be replacing those 10 acres with 6. Not long ago, 85th and Brett approved 96 units on 5 acres. within 40 feet of some residences. Last year, the city approved a 24-unit apartment project on the northeast corner of 6th and Shepherd, just west of the Browns property, 1 acre for 24 units on that acre. There's a multifamily project near 6th and Sycamore. I'm sure you're aware of it. They have 94 units on 4 acres, and this would be 23.5 units per acre. The Planning Commission's limit on this, in order to attempt to reach a compromise, which we have not agreed with them to do, is 12 units per acre, and that's for whatever acreage someone was willing to put in apartments. No one will put them in at 12 units per acre. So there's really no commercial use. The mixed use for live work could compromise the miscellaneous uses that Diane explained to you. If we were to presume that nothing in Sioux Falls was zoned and that each piece of property came in and asked for zoning, I can imagine Oakview being up in arms if we asked to be zoned agricultural. And you inquire, how can that be? You are agricultural. Well, one of the uses in agriculture, this comes from the report generated by city planning. If the zoning is denied, and the parcel will continue to be zoned as agriculture, which, among other things, allows dairy animals and dairy products, poultry and poultry products, livestock including beef cattle, sheep, swine, horses, ponies, mules, goats, or a mutation or hybrid, including breeding and grazing of any kind. They'd be up and up what could be done at this property the way it's zoned now agricultural. So what I'm asking you to do is to say, I appreciate city planning trying to compromise here, but it made sense to city planning a year ago to say it's consistent with the SHAPE Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan to approve RA1, apartment residential low density, and RA2, moderate density. We really need some long-term vision here, not just what happens in the next year, but over the next 10, 20, 30 years. 6th Street is going to continue to the east. The traffic count's going to go from 11,000 to 14, 15,000, 20,000 cars. With that zoning, we have the detention, which we provide for. We line up Bonson and Locust. My clients can market their property with a live work, knowing that anyone who's interested will spend the money to do all the development plans because what they were proposing to do fits live work. I have no other comments. I'm just asking you to please consider the Browns, who have owned this property for over 120 years. And they sold off everything else around it to help the city. Washington High School and the Kenny Anderson and the school, and it's just something that I think they want to do so they, at my age, can retire. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chair? Mr. Bundy, what I think I heard you say was you don't like the first recommendation of we're not comfortable with the number of units, okay with the drainage and the traffic?
Yes, totally.
All right.
I just can't tell you if somebody says, I have to have 98 units or I have to have 74. I don't know what the number is because I'm not a realtor. I just know that no one wants to talk with us at all now, so we're just stymied.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Mr. Brendy, could you explain the process involved in deciding to apply for a rezoning under live work?
It came from a compromise and several meetings with Diane and Mike Cooper and with the realtors. And they're in favor of, the city's in favor of live work. But in order to reach a compromise with a few of the neighbors, they decided to, in my mind, put some restrictions on live work. And I don't think that that's fair to the Browns. Live work is live work. I don't see of any other precedent for saying you get live work, but you can't do this, this, and this. It's either live work or it isn't. And that's been on the books for years. And it is what it is because we thought about it, we planned on it, we voted on it, and it's live work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Mr. Brendy.
Thank you. Lois and Kelly would like to say a few words, but they'll just wait their turn again. They'll just have a couple of comments just from their heart. Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be good. Good evening, folks.
Good evening. My name's Kelly Brown, my wife Lois. Like Arlie has stated, we lived at this address now for 34 years. We've had it for sale for the last 5 years. We had one offer. This is all kind of rehashing what he had to say. To answer your question about why we applied for this type of zoning, it was just, okay. It was so we had some kind of zoning in place. Our realtors thought that would help us. So that's where we're at. How do you have anything to say?
For 34 years, that's 3 decades and 4 years, we have lived on our 6 acres. For 34 years, we have paid taxes, kept our property neat, clean, well-maintained, and beautiful. Snow has been removed on 2 very long sidewalks. It is a park ground next to a park ground. We have raised 4 children and hosted 17 exchange students from around the world. You have heard some of our history probably before. Our family, the Lacey's, living here a total of 116 years as of April 1st, 2017. You have heard of our 5 years, 4 real estate companies working to help us sell this unique parcel. In the beginning of this zoning struggle, we received word from the city planning department that the multifamily zoning was approved as fitting under the new shape place plan for 2035 or 40. Our hopes were dashed as our neighborhood community violently opposed that multifamily use. And the city planning came up then with an idea, a plan to appease and place these conditions on our land. Even our Minnehaha County feels our property is worth much more, as our assessed valuation of this ag zoned land increased from $165,000 to $250,000 to $350,000 in 2 years. A 94% increase in 2 years. My husband Kelly works as a rural mail carrier. I work during the school year as a substitute teacher and as a driver's education instructor for both Harrisburg and Sioux Falls Community Ed program. Spring, summer, winter, fall, I'm driving the city streets and the interstates, preparing your children to be safe drivers. We were hoping to retire with the sale of this property, but that plan has been put on the back burner for 5 years now, since 2012. The plans that the city planning department have made for our property overstep the bounds of our property rights. The conditions they have placed on us, we are the applicant for a zoning change, will not permit nor give a developer the freedom to make the best use of this great space. Number one, we have 6 acres in town. Number two, we are next door to a school. Nobody needs cross the street. 3, there's a park at the back door. Number 4, we're close to a library, 1 block away. 5, we have 2 bus services at the curb. We are the sellers, not the developer. Please do not hamstring us by a conditions clause. That would stop any prospective buyer or developer, and it has. And therefore, it's stopping any sale for us. We ask only the live-work zoning with no conditions. Our case is simple. As we celebrate our country's Independence Day this last Tuesday, this is a case of property rights. It is our property, our private property. Our rights were given to us by the Constitution of the United States. We own this property. We pay taxes on it. We keep it clean. We move the snow. We want to sell our property without any conditions. Please change to live, work with no conditions. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Commissioners, are there any questions for the Browns at this point?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Do you have anything in mind? What was your vision for this land?
You know, really, we don't. We really don't. I'd like to see multifamily housing there.
I was thinking it would be wonderful. I saw a newspaper article for homes, apartments for people who are autistic, and our property is, we're back off the road. People don't even know what space we have there. And it would be a wonderful place to set up some sort of an apartment complex for people who really need to have a quiet, peaceful area, because we do have a lot of peace at our place.
Stop out anytime. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question just before you go. Okay. Mr. Brundy said you guys were comfortable with the drainage and the traffic impact conditions, but not the limitation on the number of units. Are you saying you'd rather have 0 conditions?
0 conditions, please.
Okay.
We have, in order to sell it, nobody's coming. 5 years.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you both. At this time, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 13? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Commissioners, hope you had all a great long weekend. My name is Tony Burke, and I live with my family at 804 North Caleb Avenue. As president of the Oakview Neighborhood Association, there are over 1,400 households in the Oakview neighborhood area. We have over 200 plus property owners that are in support of this Planning Commission report that's been presented to you tonight. Please accept this testimony in support, again, of this City Planning Commission staff report that recommends approval with conditions of the 6th and Bonson rezoning. I'd ask that many of the neighbors that are here tonight to please raise your hand. Over the last year, we have engaged the neighborhood, city staff, the property owners, and developers through meetings, conversations, social media, and surveys. Our neighborhood goal continues to be the same when we were here last year, to find an acceptable plan for the Oakview neighborhood, the property owners, developers, and the city. Through this engagement, we feel the City of Sioux Falls Planning Department report as submitted to you, as presented to the neighborhood, addresses several issues concerned through compromise. Density. The zoning change from agriculture to live-work with conditions fits the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. The Sioux Falls Planning Department staff report addresses density concerns. We believe the conditions outlined are favorable to the neighbors and property owners, given the maximum of 96 units for senior housing and 72 units for non-senior housing. Water management. Prior to issuing a building permit, a completed stormwater management plan is necessary to address numerous concerns presented here and at council meetings by neighbors and also the Hills of Rest Cemetery. Traffic impact. As the staff report details, addressing the long-standing issue of misalignment of Locust and Bonson Avenue at 6th Street is urgent. The realignment is a sound measure to provide a safer and friendlier environment for vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Given the frequency of near-miss incidents involving pedestrians at this irregular intersection, a comprehensive traffic and pedestrian walkway plan is required to alleviate fears of neighbors and the Path Committee, who go on record of having concerns for this area for some time. This must cover the area accessing and including Annie Sullivan Elementary School, Library, the Kenny Anderson Park, and the Washington High School. Again, in summary, the Oakview Neighborhood Association, with over 200 property owners, are in support of the approval of this report with conditions, as revised through collaboration and compromise. We thank you for your leadership and your active listening throughout this rezoning process. We urge that the report, in its entirety, be moved forward to the City of Sioux Falls Council for action. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Burke? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 13?
Good evening. My name is Dan Aesop. I reside at 7804 West Browning Street, and I just met the Browns last week. I stopped by their property as I was driving by. It's a lovely property, and I didn't know any of this until a week ago, and it just makes me hot. And I hope I can convey myself well here, but it just makes me so hot when people in the community oppose on other people's rights. As their attorney and as they conveyed, it's their property. They should be able to do whatever they want with it. The first plan from a year ago was in agreement with the Shape Places, but because people in the community opposed it, that threw a halt on that development. And so the biggest thing I guess I would want to say is shame to those people who are in opposition to the Browns and to any other people's developments. I own a small piece of property on the other side of town, and if this were to happen to me, I would be very frustrated with it as well. These are sweet, nice people, but I mean, Mr. Paulson, you asked them a good question. What do they hope to see with the property? The thing is, I don't think they really care. They're just trying to sell the property, but because people are trying to hold that from them, this is holding up their retirement and their lives, and it's just a shame. I feel that everyone watching and the people who are in opposition to this should get a little copy of these books, of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, because this country was founded on people's property rights. And putting limitations on the Browns is a huge atrocity, I do feel. And another thing to keep in mind for all those in opposition, you know, the homeowners association in the area, you know, so they bought a home. It's probably the largest investment they'll ever have, you know, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. Well, who actually pays for the development of the city? Minutely, the homeowners with their taxes, but it's the developers. They have to pay for the infrastructure, the roads, everything that happens with the development. It's the developers who pay for it. And so I just would like to remind those people who are throwing a cog in this development that it's really not their place, and I commend you for a year ago for approving it, for the city council moving forward with it as well, and I hope that you'll approve it just because it's the right thing to do without any limitations for what they can do with their property, because again, that's what this country was founded on, was property ownership and not being limited on what they can do with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any questions? Very good. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak regarding item number 13? And by the way, thank you everyone who is from the public testifying on this for staying within your 5-minute and presenting new testimony thus far. All right,
Hi,
please
my
go
name
ahead.
is Joy Schrader. Thank you for welcoming us all this evening. I live at 908 North Caleb Avenue, which is to the slight northwest of the property, and I used to live directly south of it on Locust Avenue. So I find that I have the perspective of living on both ends of this. So I stood in front of you, most of you, a year ago, for those of you who are returning from that time. And I've also stood in front of the City Council multiple times. And my greatest disappointment in reference to the comments that were just made, we understand that Kelly and Lois have property rights. And I would like to say that they are definitely friends and neighbors of ours. My husband is actually the one that's been doing their snow removal for them. So we have definite connections. With that being said, I think it was rather short-sighted of the commission last year that in face of all the opposition that was raised, particularly regarding the density, the traffic, and the drainage, that the proposal for RA1 and RA2 was moved forward at the same night, instead of there being a little bit more in-depth study of those three things in particular. And I'm not exactly sure where Mr. Brendy got his traffic count numbers, but we have had discussions in and among the neighborhood that the traffic counts have been taken when school was not in session. So I don't know if there's really a whole lot of merit in the numbers that were represented tonight. So as a neighborhood development, community organization that we have met multiple times. We have sat down with the Browns. We have sat down with the city. We have worked on a compromise. Unfortunately, at one of the meetings that we did have with the Browns, we were told that their representation didn't include some of the information to them. It wasn't shared full circle. And in fact, the Browns' own children said, we wish we had been included in this process sooner upon one of our meetings with the city planning department. And so I think there is certainly room for compromise, but we also know that regarding the density in particular, that really is what drives the rest of the issues. I mean, drainage is going to be one thing in and of itself, but it's truly the density that's going to drive the issue. And according to the compatibility matrix that are located within the Shaped Places guidance, that the 12 units per acre is what is identified in a low density residential area, and that is what we're in the midst of here. We're not somewhere on the fringe of town, and so all of the rules that apply for Shaped Places certainly apply here. And so I would encourage you that if you are not willing to pass the live work with restrictions and with the limitations, that it may be something that you need to defer so that all of the parties can come together in a more reasonable manner and come up with some other compromise. But again, the density is truly what drives the issue. I believe when Diane spoke about last year's proposal, that the number of units that was proposed was 112. But I would like to remind the commission that the original proposal that was approved was for 143 units, which then was well over 200 parking spaces. And that Lloyd's back of the napkin sketch for that proposal wouldn't have allowed for the beauty of the artistic complex that Lois referred to, because all of those trees would have to be destroyed to get a complex like that to fit. So there's still a lot of room here for compromise, and so I would encourage you not to eliminate the restrictions on this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to item number 13? And at this point, I just remind new testimony only.
My name is Jay Root. I live on 3914 East 3rd Street. My kids went to Washington High, and a lot of kids in our neighborhood go to the grade school there. If you guys ever drive 6th Street or ever drive 3rd Street, count all the intersections that we can cross the street. And right now the fields are being full with soccer players, cricket players, all kinds of activities. And if you bring in a big complex, you're gonna, already the school is being overwhelmed. The library is really not for any adults anymore. It's the kids hang out. But you take a look at this, the way the street is there, they're going to have to realign that because there's no safe way to cross. And you got a beautiful park there. Just look at all that beautiful area there. You can go and play softball, baseball, soccer, all that, but you can't cross the street. So again, they're going to have some crosswalks in there and safe. 6th Street is nothing but a 45 to 55 mile an hour speedway. And 3rd Street is the same way because when school's on, good luck on backing out of your driveway. That has probably not much to do with this other than if you put in 115 units, you're going to flood that area. And if you opened it to senior citizens that would be willing to walk 15 feet and help out in the school, that would really be great. But to bring in a bunch of more apartments, we've had 2 major fires there. Garage burned down at that one apartment, and then someone started that foam over there when they were re-roofing the grade school. And there's just a lot of running around, bikes being stolen, stuff like that. And it's really getting within 1 mile radius. How come we got all these apartments? And I ain't saying there shouldn't be an apartment going there, but I don't think I want a 5-foot apartment and another 300 people in that neighborhood, which we can't handle it now, and they can't even get across the street if they want to go do anything. So I wish you guys would, we're not after the Browns. I understand, but they're leaving. And we're still living there, and we got investments too. And it'd be nice to have something for our senior citizens. And why would you want to have a big complex and some guys are drug addicts or so, and they got to be away from a school so many feet? Well, you can almost spit at the school from your apartment complex. So, otherwise, I think it's a great set of property and nice to keep the trees and all that. It's an old, been there in the neighborhood for a long, long time, but it's been in the neighborhood for a long, long time. There was probably other opportunities to sell it to. So, but we got to have safety, and then flooding, forget about it. I wouldn't probably get a burial plot and all of a sudden be floating away. So, and the water does go down there. The city already tried to do something with them big culverts, so. All right. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Root. Any questions?
Thanks for allowing me to speak. They didn't want me to.
Any other testimony from the public on item number 13? Hello.
I'm Diana Gregory. I live on North Lewis Avenue. I lived in apartments on East 6th for over 6 years, and now I live over 20 years, and I'm abutting this property. I don't think this picture gives the whole picture. And it's the things we have addressed, so I won't dwell on them, but density is immense there. I don't know how many of you have driven down 6th Street. From that property going west, apartments, 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 and they're not, ideally, we would all hope that whoever bought this property, if you remove the restrictions, would keep that in mind. But if you remove those restrictions, my fear is it's going to be solid 3-story apartments, and the density can't handle it there. Bonson Avenue is a huge safety issue with children coming out of that school. If you sat there one day while school's in session and watched that, you would understand. And if you put apartments there, it's even to the number they're addressing. And as far as being a cog, we're not trying to be cogs. We're trying to also express our rights to express what we feel strongly about to prevent future problems in that area. Future problems of density, traffic, safety for the children. We're not trying to keep the Browns from selling their property. We want them to sell it, and that's what the compromise comes. We didn't say we can't be anything. We're just saying we need it to be with some limitations, and that's why I'm really wishing you'd think on that. And I don't usually speak, but I feel passionately about this, so I felt compelled to. And I think it'll prevent future issues if we just take this action now. Thank you for your time.
But commissioners, any questions? Thank you, Mrs. McGregory. Any other input for item number 13? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name's John Stratman, 325 West La Quinta Circle. I've never met the Browns. I have followed their saga in the paper. I don't know any of the good people that live in the neighborhood that are objecting to the conditions being removed. What I do know is this is clearly private property rights. And I understand progress brings along with it a lot of changes that mean some people have to accommodate some inconveniences that come their way. You know, those inconveniences might be crossing a street, a little more congestion, backing out of your driveway. But that pales in comparison to what we're trying to do to the Browns. It's been said tonight, well, we're not after the Browns. But you know what? If you don't remove those restrictions, you're sure as heck after their pocketbook. And if that's what the people want to do, let the kind people that live in the neighborhood buy the property at a fair price and let these people move on. I don't see how any conscionable decision can be made here tonight that doesn't give the Browns what they're asking for. They're asking very simply, let us sell our property. It was said earlier, we're not trying to stop them from selling the property. That may be true. But I'll tell you what, they're trying to stop them from selling it at the fairest, highest value that the property can bring. And I understand completely the inconveniences that might be suffered by a lot of the other people in the neighborhood. That's unfortunate. It really is. That happens every time a new building goes up somewhere. Happens every time somebody buys a new car and drives on the streets, and we got one more car going up and down the streets. So I would ask you, give the Browns an opportunity to sell their property at the highest possible value.
Appreciate it, Mr. Stratman. Commissioners, any questions? Thank you, sir. Anyone else for item number 13? Seeing none, I will look for commission action.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner.
I'm going to make a motion to approve item 13 with 0 conditions, and we can add those as amendments going forward if other commissioners so choose, but at least that gives us a starting point for discussion.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second for live work zoning without restrictions. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question of Diane?
That's okay with her.
Yeah,
Yes,
if
that
it's
is okay.
You got to sit long enough. Now you get
Yes.
to jump up and down. Thank you. So can you walk me through the rationale for the restriction on the number of units for this area, the 96 for senior housing or 72 for other housing multifamily?
For non-senior. And Joy was correct when she spoke earlier. The original proposal with Lloyd was for 143 units. And that's what it was approved on with Planning Commission prior to it going to City Council. We worked with them on that plan, and again, because of the concerns that were expressed, they modified that down to 112 units. So that was my comment, that the last development that we had reviewed was 112. Based on some of the concern with the elementary school and the traffic and congestion with children, we were trying to limit the number of vehicles that were pulling in and out, or mostly out of that 6-acre parcel with 112 or whatever number it might be. We were trying to minimize that. And certainly if there were 96 senior housing units there, maybe they're not 8 to 5 working, maybe they're retired, maybe they have 1 car per couple. And then the 72 units, 72 units for, I guess, normal rate apartments, just limiting again the number of cars or vehicles in and out of there based on the congestion with the children and parent drop-off along Bonson.
So some follow-ups. Was that concerns from the neighbors or concerns from engineering?
Most of those concerns were from the neighbors, but we did speak with engineering about it. And a couple of things, it also went to the PATH committee last August, and the PATH committee is actually a group of citizens, and it's the liaison is one of our engineers talking about safe sites at schools and access. And what they looked at with this site is certainly having that realignment at 6 and Bonson because of the curve in the road that may slow vehicles down. They wanted to be able to limit the number of driveways and be able to increase sight lines. So they didn't necessarily want anybody parking along Bonson for parent drop-off with vehicles coming in and out 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever time if they're coming back at noon, or conflict with children and other activities with the school. So mostly to do with the children and what the activity is at Annie Sullivan School.
Okay. But to get specifically to 72, was it kind of?
I think we started with what we felt was a comfortable number, and that was at the 96. And again, 72 still allowed for other development on the site. Just a reminder, the live-work zoning isn't something that the city staff came up with. That's what was presented to us that they wanted. The other option, of course, is they could always wait to rezone the property when they do have somebody that is interested in buying it and developing it. Otherwise, coming back to the 72, we just felt as though having that number of apartment units allowed for other retail or commercial office development. Really, live-work is truly a mixed-use development, so that was our goal with it.
Okay, and I mean, if there were no restrictions on the number of units, how many could there be? Do we have an idea of what that would be?
They could go up to RA2, which is 48 units per building, and they'll have to work that out based on the number of parking. If I went back to, say, what Lloyd had, that was both RA1 and RA2, and they were up to 143 and well over 200 parking stalls for that.
And do that under live work?
They could with RA2. Yeah, both RA1 and RA2 are allowed.
Are allowed in the live work?
In live work, correct.
Mr. Chair, I have a question of Diane. The only development plan we've seen with regards to this property in terms of this rezoning request is the one that the staff worked on, and could we see it?
Sure, and just so you understand, this wasn't what we were proposing for any kind of a development. This was really a tool that we proposed just for discussion with the owners, the owner representative, and the neighbors, taking into account possibly retaining some of the trees there at both the north and the east, and then some of the trees at the center, and possibly a small building that exists on the property now, which is a quite unique stone building that's been there, I would imagine, for probably 100 years. So the proposal here was for a mixed use of apartments as well as office and commercial. So trying to show how we could still retain some of the landscaping that exists, buffer yards that would be required, and then the potential of a pond there to the south, and then the realignment. It doesn't quite show what the realignment, but yeah, that would have to work for that intersection in any proposal.
In order to determine what's the most significant factors involved in the value that a property might have, those questions would have to be asked, or some kind of presentation to you with regards to what can be done on a particular piece of property as part of the rezoning request. If you were the applicant wanting to know what's going to be permitted, allowed to accomplish that highest value, wouldn't there need to be requests for information about what could be done?
If I understand your question, typically when we have a rezone of this nature, we would require a development plan of some kind, so we at least know what we're talking about. And because they don't have a buyer on the property at this point, they don't have anything. And obviously, live work could be a multitude of things in different configurations.
Right.
So
they didn't have a buyer historically either when it was agricultural.
no.
They didn't have a buyer.
I don't know what the order is, but I'd like to suggest a second alternative motion that we defer this and request a development plan be presented so that we would know how those objectives would be accomplishable with regards to the Browns' request.
I'm just going to reiterate what I heard from the owner's representative and the owners themselves, and that is that they haven't had anybody step forward to purchase the property because the zoning isn't in place. So I think it is their desire to have it rezoned to be able to sell the property. They are, of course, asking for the restrictions to be taken off of that. Whatever you choose to do tonight, if it goes forward, it goes to City Council, and obviously there would be further discussion at that point.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that, John, that I don't know that we need a development plan, because they could come in with this exact plan. If it gets rezoned live work, we're not approving their plan.
Right.
We're approving the zoning of that parcel of ground, and anything that's allowed within live work could be done later. So to me, the development plan is kind of a moot thing that's sometimes nice to see. It gives people an idea of what could be there, but it's the zoning ordinance that's going to dictate what is there.
But we don't know whether their plan is going to produce more units than are being identified here.
No, but we know within live work what they can do.
But that's still a function of how the property is able to be developed, including the requirements to provide for what's identified as conditions, which we haven't discussed. In that, I assume, would be affected with regards to the realignment and how that will create a different setback status for the property. The drainage, is a requirement of a permit anyway, so, we're just reiterating what's already a requirement. So
correct.
It is a condition. We can't take that off. They have to comply with that in order to get a permit. And it seems like you had proximity around a compromise, but the missing pieces are what isn't able to be done as compared to what's being proposed in your recommendations of what could be done to produce something that would be marketable under a rezoning procedure. I hope that was clear. We don't know how many apartments they can build other than what we've been told by the staff, because we don't have their plan. And it doesn't incorporate the condition of the traffic realignment or some of the other things that have been brought forward or suggested in terms of what would be kept on the property, like the trees. So I think we're really missing some information, and I think if we had it all, we would do better in affecting the compromise that I think everybody wants.
Diane, would they still have to come back to, or for engineering for the road? Would engineering basically want them to realign that road?
Yes.
As part of their, I mean, even if we didn't have that stipulation on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But they are encouraging that that would happen.
And, Mr. Chair, Diane, it seemed like it was a little bit redundant on, and I'm agreeing with kind of Nick on removing that, because it says the applicant is required to meet engineering design standards for drainage prior to issuing of any building permit. Why do we have that as a stipulation?
I think it was more as a reassurance, because that has been a concern and issue for the neighbors. So that condition was put in basically as a reassurance to them,
Just
that
a
that would be
reassurance.
taken care of.
So it's really not needed, because
Like you said, it is redundant.
for you to issue a building permit, it has to be engineered for wastewater anyway.
Correctly.
Okay.
Diane, have we ever put these stipulations on another piece of property?
Those exact ones, or which ones in
these,
particular?
the three that are there. I don't think I've ever.
I don't know that I've ever seen either the engineering, the drainage, or the traffic one included, because as Steve said, those are engineering design standards that get reviewed prior to a building permit being issued. In terms of the limitation on the number of units, we've had various conditions on other rezones in the past, but I don't know that it was that specific to a live work with limitation of apartment units.
Thank you, Diane. Just to clean this up real quick, we had a motion and a second on live work without restriction, and then we had Commissioner Paulson made, he called it a secondary motion that would have to be reworded, as it's been described to me, as a substitute motion for a deferral to present a project plan to the commission. And again, in the spirit of cleaning that up, is there a second to that substitute motion? Okay, seeing none, that will fall off for lack of a second, and I just wanted to clear that up before we continued forward. So, any further questions for staff at this point?
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Any further discussion?
Well, I would move for an amendment to add the traffic impact requirement. When city staff and engineering ultimately require something like this, to make sure that the future property owner would be amenable to an adjustment that would align the roads, I think that makes some sense to apply to this case. It will happen anyway, but as this is a specific requirement that would help the new potential owners to understand that particular limitation and protect the city's interest at the same time, in my opinion. So that's why I'm advising for that particular amendment.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Irvin. So we have a amended motion to add the traffic impact study with the requirement thereto to align the roads, meaning Bonson to Locust Avenue. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And a second by, thank you, Councilor Gaspar. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think I heard Diane say that would happen whether or not it was a stipulation. So it seems to me that would be redundant. It'd be like adding the drainage one if we added that as a stipulation. So I'm not in favor of that.
I'm thinking this is just so it's specific to, not just a engineering traffic study, this is specific to the alignment, I think is what Sean was getting at.
And I think that's what Diane said would happen anyway.
So basically, they're still going to have to go through that no matter what. So we haven't really put that stipulation on anyone.
Yeah, whether or not we stipulate it, it's going to happen.
And Mr. Chair, I think that what I tried to clarify was, I think by putting this stipulation on there, it highlights the fact that that realignment will have to be considered as part of any final development plan. And so it just raises it to that next level that maybe somebody that isn't aware of that particular item would be aware prior to their purchase of the property. And that's why I think it's helpful to have it on there, in my opinion.
Very good, great discussion, everyone. So, Claire, Danny, at this point, do we vote on the amendment?
I can't remember if the amendment's been seconded, but if it has.
It was. We would have to vote. We've had enthralling discussion as well. Thank you, everybody, for that. So, at this point, the amendment to the initial motion of live work unrestricted with the traffic impact study and the requirement to realign Bonson and Locust is on the table. All in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, show of hands. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying, or by raising your hand. All opposed? Sorry, which
I'm
one?
voting that way because I'm against the motion that we're not going to have anything provided for in regards to restrictions.
This is for the amendment
then-
only.
Well,
It fails,
So-
Mr. Chair.
motion and not in favor of that.
4 to 2 against.
So I missed the count. Go ahead, Diane.
It failed, Mr. Chair.
It failed. Okay, thank you. So we're back to discussion on the original motion, live work without restrictions. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with live work without restrictions. I was comfortable with the RA1 and RA2 when we passed it however long ago it was. I think live work gives a nice compromise that it encourages some of the commercial and reduces the number of residential properties included, so I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments, discussion? Very good. All in favor of approval of item number 13 to live work zoning without restrictions, please signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Yes.
Majority rules there. Item number 13 is approved.
Item 14, 6891, 2017, rezone from the RA1 Apartment Residential Low Density District to the O Office District located at 4900 South Cottonwood Place.
The applicant for this is Kenneth Cheddar, and the owner is Kevin Keating with Murray Properties. The property is located north of West 57th Street and South Oxbow Avenue. The .32 acre site is currently vacant and zoned as RA1 low-density apartments. The rezone request to office is for an approximately 2,400 square foot law office with about 8 to 9 parking stalls. Access in and out of the site will be at South Oxbow Avenue. You can see the layout here that is proposed. Due to the adjacency to residential forms, buffer yards are required to the north, east, and west and will be reviewed prior to building permit can be issued. Right now, the submittal here, the site plan only shows what the setbacks are. It does not show the buffer yards, so that will have to be added. If the rezoning request is approved, the applicant can construct an office building, and if the rezoning is denied, the parcel will continue to be zoned RA1 and could be developed for low-density apartments. Our office took several phone calls on this application from neighbors that were interested in the development, and some may be here tonight to ask further questions. Because the subject application is consistent with the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, staff does recommend approval for this rezoning. I can answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for staff on item number 14? Thank you, Diane. Is the applicant here this evening? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name's Ken Cheddar. I'm the applicant here. I'm a lawyer here in town, and my address at work now is 4201 South Minnesota Avenue. I've been a practicing attorney here in Sioux Falls for about 18 years, and we'd like to build an office there. I did talk with some of the property owners. If you can see on the picture there, there's some townhomes to the north. I visited with some of those folks prior to the start of the meeting tonight, and they may have some comments, but my understanding is they're not opposed to the rezoning, but they just had some concerns about whether there would be a fence on that north property line or a 2-foot berm, and maybe some concerns about drainage. Certainly willing to work with those folks, and we don't want to impact their property negatively in any way. And it sounds like those are things that would be part of the building permit process. This site plan that we have proposed is, we have not engaged the services of an architect yet, so this is preliminary and certainly could be subject to change.
Thank you, Mr. Cheddar. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 14? Good evening,
My
sir.
name is Charlie Stonebeck. I live at 4909 South Oxbow. I live in the leftmost condo there, and there were three others here. One of them had to leave already, who live in the other 4 condos. And our primary concern is on the, with regard to the level A buffer, which isn't shown on here, but that property slopes to the northwest. And as you can see, there's going to be a large parking lot, or well, 8 parking spaces. It's a small lot, so a relatively large parking lot and drive area there. And we're concerned about runoff coming down to our property. So first, we would see that if the level A buffer has a berm, it would mitigate some of that runoff. But I would also like to have the city engineer approve any drainage there, because my property being on the far left is sort of where the water's going to run. And I would like to see the drainage approval before it gets going.
Sure. The good news is for you there that the city engineers would address the drainage issue at the time a building permit was issued. So at this point, we're looking at the use of the land itself. So your concerns are noted, though. We appreciate
but
that.
All 5 of the property owners would much prefer a 2-foot landscape berm than a wooden fence in front of us, just for property values, whatnot. But we really have, or I have no objection, and the other people I've talked to have no objection to what the applicant is proposing there, so long as they address the drainage issue and the berm, the looks of them, instead of having a 4-foot fence in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, commissioners? Sorry, forgot that piece there. Anyone else like to address item number 14? Seeing none, I will look for sorry, sir.
I'm a resident out there, John Whiteman, at 4900 South Oxbow, Unit 101. And I just have some concerns about the project. Is this appropriate for me to name them now? I live directly across Oxbow from this property, and that's my apartment right on the corner. Directly across Oxbow, and I'm concerned about the traffic increase right at that intersection. I have seen it, and for putting a commercial building there with the property, and if we're talking about an office with parking, I'm concerned about the increase in traffic. It has increased, to my perception, quite a bit in the last year. I've lived there a year and a half. I don't really understand why the traffic is increasing so much right at that intersection. My assumption is there's a lot of building way out on the west of 57th Street and people going in that direction. The driveway access to my apartment is right directly across from this particular piece of property. It's and that's my access to emergency services. And if there's so much traffic up there, I'm concerned about that. There's also right across 57th Street from this piece of property, directly across the street, is a federal wetlands and wildlife preserve. And the view of which, I mean, it's supposed to enhance the beauty of the area, the view of which will be blocked, I think, by a commercial building from the people that are directly behind it and partially from mine. If the traffic keeps increasing in that area, I'm concerned that the city will have to widen and rebuild the old intersection for safety concerns. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteman. Commissioners, any questions? Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any other public input on item number 14? Seeing none, I will look for commission action.
Motion for approval.
Got a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
And there is a second. Any discussion?
I think that, Mr. Stonebeck, your concerns will be addressed during the building process. Engineering will look at this before, and if I'm wrong in saying this, they cannot drain any more water off than is already draining already. So if it slopes to your property now, there is some runoff there, so they cannot drain any more than is already is draining there. So engineering will take that all into account, whether it's a berm or storm sewer or whatever, to keep more water than what is currently draining onto your property now.
After my discussions with Mr. Shutter, I feel I will do well on it.
Very good. And for those at home listening, they've had discussions. They're satisfied with what they've heard. Is that paraphrasing correct? Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of this one too, and I appreciate comments about the traffic, but it is currently zoned RA1, so no matter what got built there, there was going to be an increase in traffic, and I actually think this probably might be a slight decrease in what could have been. So.
Very good.
I'll echo what Nick just said, and when it comes to property values, I don't see anything if there's a difference of a berm or a fence. I mean, either way, it should be fine.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? One last thing I'll mention quickly to Mr. Whiteman. As soon as they're done with construction on 49th Street, it's going to be great. Looking forward to that myself, so just be patient. All right, we have a motion and a second. We've had good discussion for item number 14. All in favor of approval of item number 14, please signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Item number 14 is approved.
Item 15, 6906 2017 rezone from the O Office District to the RA1 Apartment Residential Low Density District located at 3201 South Theodore Avenue.
Jason Bieber representing Planning and Building Services. This is an application by Tom Reeves with Volunteers of America. It is located north of the Ace on Theodore and West 41st Street. The applicant is proposing to rezone this 1.8 acre site from the old office to an apartment residential low density district. They are looking at constructing a 2-story, 21 unit apartment complex. The concept plan submitted by the applicant does indicate the required 25-foot front and 10-foot side and rear yard setbacks. Parking will be required at a rate of 1.5 parking spaces per unit for a total of 32 parking spaces. Their concept plan does indicate 33, so they have gone more parking than what's required. A level A buffer yard will also be required running along that north property line. This buffer yard includes a 10-foot setback, 2-foot berm or 4-foot fence, and the 20 units of landscaping per 100 lineal feet. And as you can see by the concept plan and the aerial, there's already a significant amount of mature trees along that north property line. The proposed zoning does meet the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. The proposed low-density apartments should provide a good transition from that large commercial development to the south to the existing single-family residential uses to the north. Finally, those existing trees along the north property line should provide that necessary transition from this apartment complex to those single-family homes to the north. If the rezoning is approved, the property can be used for a 2-story apartment complex with a maximum of 24 units. If the rezoning is denied, this parcel will continue to be zoned O office and can be used for a maximum of a 2-story office of 60,000 square feet. Because the subject application is consistent with the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, staff does recommend approval of this request. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Jason. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Thank you, sir. Is the applicant here this evening?
Good evening. I'm Dennis Hoffman. I have the privilege for the last 5 years to lead the efforts of Volunteers America Dakotas. Volunteers America Dakotas has been in Sioux Falls since 1920. We believe we've been an active and meaningful part of the city's social service provisions for people and part of a very important safety net. We are here tonight to talk a little bit about a growing problem in Sioux Falls, homelessness. If we've been watching the news, we know we're above 900, approaching 1,000 children in the Sioux Falls School District that experienced or are at risk of being homeless in the last year. Of those 900 plus, 90 some were in that 17, 18, 19-year-old group. We have for 15 years provided independent apartments where we try to help these young people come into a safe home environment with supports, encourage them to finish school, find jobs, pay bills, they all pay rent to us, and move on in their lives. When we look at our community of 250,000 people around here and realize that we have 10 beds for that today, we hope to do better. And the proposal is to double that number. And so I have Steph Monroe, who is our Managing Director of Children, Youth, and Family, to give you the details of that tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Stephanie Monroe. I'm the Managing Director of Children, Youth, and Families for Volunteers of America. As Dennis noted, the proposed multifamily housing project that we are considering is under expansion. I think it's important to note for the Commission, and the reason that we're here talking to you about our tenant selection criteria is it does involve a population that would be 16 to 21-year-olds, and that is unique in terms of providing housing. We do coordinate with their guardians in terms of leases and providing supportive services. This is not a treatment facility. This is not a shelter. This is not a group home. This is multifamily housing with supportive services provided on site, which our organization does and does very well. The criteria for applying to this property is for a housing specific. It's not treatment specific. And so we are providing case management, life skills supports, and other supports for students, as Dennis mentioned, that are still enrolled in high school, employment training, and life skills education. And those are pieces that we are providing in terms of supportive services in the structure itself. So it's important to note that we do provide accountability and supervision to those individuals that would be living in the property. Questions from the commission?
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, any questions at this point for Mrs. Morrow? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 15?
Hi, my name is Danielle Scott. I live at 7216 West Panama Street, which would be 2 blocks from this place. I run a daycare out of my home that's licensed through the city and state for the last 19 years. And I guess my concern is the increased safety of my kids. There's also another daycare on Rosemont, which is only another block from this place. And I have concerns, is there going to be supervision at all times at this place? I also have concerns about parents knowing that this is here, if I'm going to lose business because of this going in close to my house. Those are my main concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Scott at this point? Perhaps the applicant might be able to come forward and address Ms. Scott's concerns.
Thank you. Those are common questions and common concerns when we talk about providing support and supervision. This was a piece that we addressed in neighborhood meetings. We held 2 neighborhood meetings in relationship to this property and visited about the supports provided. In relationship to supervision, we do have supervision on site at the facility, and we do have a 24-hour access to on-call. And so those are pieces that we provide as part of the supportive services provided in the facility. Again, just want to reiterate that the eligibility criteria for living in the family unit is the need for housing, and it's a voluntary program. So individuals apply to participate and sign leases, as Dennis noted, as part of their participation in the program.
Very good, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 15? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Kurt Aberson. I reside at 7118 West Rosemont Lane, probably about a block and a half from the proposed site. I guess my main concern is, just for safety. I've lived in the house where I'm at basically since it was built in 2000, and just seeing the changes in the community and some of the residential area. I think this was zoned for a specific purpose, which was office, and that's why people in the community moved into this residence knowing how the areas around the property were zoned. About probably 2 years ago, we already had some of the rezoning where there's a large apartment building that was put up right across the street from this residence. And that was, at that time, we were promised it was only going to be 2 stories. It ended up being a 3-story building, and it's really kind of changed the look and feel of the whole community. And I think by adding another multi-use building across the street, it's going to once again depreciate our property values in the area. And I respect the need for this type of a thing, but I just don't think it belongs in the area that they're proposing it in. It is zoned for office for a reason, and that's basically why a lot of people in the area initially moved to this neighborhood, is because of its proximity to 41st Street, knowing what was going to be in the area, and also proximity to the high school that's right there. So I just don't think it's appropriate rezoning for this type of purpose. Not specifically for the use that it's going to be. I have definitely concerns there, but I really think it just doesn't belong for more multi-family or multi-use, and it really should remain office.
Thank you, Mr. Haverson. Any questions, commissioners? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding item number 15? Good evening, sir.
My name's Bruce Keppen. Live at 2405 South Villanova Avenue, which is just a few blocks away. And I'm a retired physician and moved. My wife's from Sioux Falls, and I grew up on a farm near Madison, South Dakota. And we really researched where we should buy a retirement home. We saw that that was zoned for offices, not for residential. And then I have one concern. I'm not sure I understand, but this is for people 16 to 21.
Mrs. Murrow, would you mind coming forward again?
Well,
just to clarify again her comments, I don't want to speak for her, but.
Well, and my question is, are there parents with them? Or are these going to be independent 18 to 21-year-olds who are living independent with, you talk about their supervision.
Could you please speak into the mic?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I don't quite understand, I guess. I know she said there would be supervision available or help available. But I guess my question is more to the point is there a parent in the house or a parent in the apartment? If these are 16 to 21-year-olds, I'd like to know, if there's curfew or if they're just free range. I'm not quite understanding, I guess, what's going into these low-density apartments. That, 16 to 20, I may be okay with it, but if this is, and it was advertised at one point as troubled teens, then I do have a problem with that. I think it does affect the safety of the neighborhood.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Catman, besides that one? Or combination there too? Okay. If, please, the folks here, I'd like Volunteers of America to address that. And just this one last time, kind of, if you can give us all a lowdown as to what is going to be going there.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and they're certainly valid questions. The individuals that we're going to be serving in this multifamily housing, the eligibility criteria is 16 to 21-year-olds. We provide supportive services in independent living, so they apply to the program. It's a voluntary program. We do need guardian permission. They do sign leases for their apartments, but their guardians sign with them. So if they're under the age of 18, they can't legally sign into a lease, and so their guardians sign leases for them. These are not young people that can safely live at home or for other reasons are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And so they are not living with a parent. They are enrolling in our services, and their guardians sign leases that allow them to live independently with supervision. For those individuals who are 18 to 21-year-olds, they're of legal age. They can sign leases as you would in any multifamily housing property. The piece that makes that unique in serving that population is that the supportive services that we provide on site, we do have a staff office on site in the building that we have manage between 16 and 20 hours a day, and so we do provide supervision on site as well as case management, life skills education, and support for individuals to live independently. The eligibility criteria for our program is that the individual is at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness. And to reiterate again, it is not a treatment facility, nor is it treatment focused. So the goal is affordable housing and supportive services so that individuals can live independently.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Mr. Catman, did that address your questions?
I'm not sure it did. It sounds to me like there will be 16 to 21-year-olds living by themselves with supervision available on site 16 to 20 hours a day. So some of these 16-year-olds will have an apartment to their own with no adult supervision, and they will come and go as they please. You know, and as she stated, these are, you know, obviously they need a place to go. But it sounds like they've been in bad situations where they don't have a stable, for some reason, don't have a stable parents at home. So I do worry about these youths, whether they're, how their behavior will be.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I have a...
I'm just sorry, before anyone else comes up, I need staff to come up to the podium quick. I need to clarify something with respect to this, this particular item. Just so we don't get lost any further in a fog here, this is an application for RA1, and it does not require, beyond this particular zoning request, any kind of conditional use or any kind of permitting beyond that for the purposes that the Volunteers of America are looking to use this property for. Is that correct, as you understand it?
That is correct. They are requesting to construct an apartment complex in an RA1 zoning district. No matter if somebody's 16 or 50 or 75 or 80, it doesn't matter what the age of the person living there is. It's a multiple dwelling apartment complex.
Okay, I want us to get focused on the use of the land for an apartment and not beyond, the plans beyond that. So, thank you, Jason.
Yep. Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Since
Go ahead,
Jason's
Blair.
up here, what right now could go there with office? What?
Office, you can do multiple dwellings actually on a second floor. So if they would construct a building with office or apartments on the first floor, they could do a second floor dwelling unit. They could construct a building upwards of 60,000 square feet on this parcel, as long as they can provide the parking, setbacks, and that kind of stuff. Some of the other uses allowed, I believe they can do a group home on the specific lot right now, and then some other utility type things. So,
Any other questions for staff while he's up here? Thank you, Jason.
Mr. Chair, I had a question to the applicant, if they could get them back one more time.
Sure, Mr. Hoffman or Mrs. Moreau.
Could you comment on experience with this kind of program, either here in the community or elsewhere?
We can. This is a program, and thank you for the question, that we've operated, and we are currently operating in the city. This is our 16th year. We operate out of a building now that has 10 efficiency apartments in it, that we provide a similar service array, just as I've described to you, in relationship to curfew, accountability, supervision, and staff support. Our services are licensed by the state of South Dakota. The facility itself is not. It's the service piece, thus the supportive services programming component, and the housing piece is separate.
I would like to add that we did bring along with us a 4.5-minute video from Kellerland, who did a review of this in the last month. And I think for a comfort level, if we could have your permission, we brought along, you might enjoy watching it, because you might be hearing about this more as we move through the process.
Legal opinion on that, Danny? At this point, I don't know if it's germane to an apartment zoning or not.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
We appreciate the offer, but for this particular purpose, I think we'll leave it off at this point, so thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicants while they're Thank you both. Any other input from the audience on item number 15? Sorry, Mr. Catman, you've already had 2 times.
She just raised a question. She said there's a curfew. I understand.
Mr. Catman, we will have order. You've been up twice. I want to give other people an opportunity to speak first. You're out of order. Is there anyone else that would like to speak regarding item number 15?
Hi, Mike Edwards. I live at 7300 West Rosemont Circle. Our property is just right next door to where this property is. You know, again, we've lived there knowing it was going to be zoned for an office for years. And, you know, like I said, with the rezoning to multifamily, you know, once you let that genie out of the bottle, it can become almost anything. And since this is going to be a revolving door, I mean, most of these residents are going to be 6 to 9 months. They're not all going to succeed, but I mean, we want them to succeed. However, if they don't succeed, you know, what are they going to do in the meantime? You know, because again, there is no supervision outside the doors. People are still free to come and go as they want. They can wander through the neighborhoods. Again, we've all lived here for years. You know, we've made it a nice neighborhood, and that's what we want to have. And, you know, if you have someone who really has no investment in the neighborhood, you know, how much do they care about what's going on a daily basis? So my concern is, you know, we don't know what's going to happen security-wise in the whole neighborhood by, you know, letting, you know, yet another apartment building in there with people that we know have, you know, some issues. That's why I think it should be staying as office use.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Edwards? Appreciate it, sir. Thank you for your input. Anyone else in the audience like to speak regarding item number 15? I'm sorry, sir. The applicant, you've had your time. Is there anyone else in the audience, aside from the applicant, staff, that would like to speak regarding item number 15? Seeing none, I will look for commission action.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve this item.
We have a motion to approve item number 15. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair? So I appreciate a lot of the discussion we had around the applicant, but in this situation, we're approving a rezone, and I look at it as a land use decision. It doesn't matter who the applicant is. This is why I'm not always in favor of the site plan and everything going into a rezone, because we get bogged down in some details that I don't know are pertinent to a decision on land use. So I look at, does RA1 belong as a buffer between C3 and single family next to an RA3? My opinion is yes. I will think a lot of people would tell you RA1 is even a step down from office as far as intensity of zoning, so it should make it even more compatible with the surrounding area.
Thank you, Commissioner Sershin. Any other discussion?
Nick, on that, I'll echo what he said. But I would say to, you know, the neighbors to voice your, when it goes to city council, show up and voice your opinion there. But we're looking at just a land use issue here. So that's what we look at is, does this make sense as a good transition in the neighborhood? So.
Thank you, Commissioner Lukey. Any other question or any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of item number 15, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, same sign. Item number 15 is approved.
Item 16, 6910-2017, conditional use for on-sale alcohol within 500 feet of a sensitive land use located north of West 57th Street and I-229.
The conditional use permit is for JJ's Wine Spirits for an on-sale alcohol conditional use permit that is located within 500 feet of a sensitive use. The site is located adjacent to Sertoma Park to the north. The applicant representing JJ's would like to provide wine tasting and sell alcohol in a retail setting. The proposed on-sale alcohol beverage establishment meets the criteria of the comprehensive plan. West 57th Street and nearby intersections of Southwestern Avenue and South Louise Avenue have several commercial businesses providing on-sale alcohol similar to this proposal. Because the application has provided clarity to indicate the location, nature, and extent of work proposed, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit. And I can answer any questions you have.
Commissioners, any questions for staff? Thank you, Diane. Is the applicant here this evening?
Evening, Norman Drake, Legacy Developments. We have a proposed tenant that would like to change his use a little bit to allow the wine tastings and barrel testings within his facility, and that's the reason for the on-sale license and the conditional use.
Commissioners, any questions? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak regarding item number 16? Seeing none, I will look for commission action.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Got a motion for approval and a second. Any discussion?
It's good to see development of this land finally.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All those in favor then of approval of item number 16, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Item number 16 is approved.
Item 17, 6916, 2017, conditional use for an office building to not include a pitched roof and exterior brick located at 6810 South Minnesota Avenue.
The applicant here is Raquel Blount with Lloyd Companies. The applicant is requesting to construct a roughly 5,600 square foot office building utilizing modern architecture instead of the traditional pitch roof and brick siding of similar structures within the area. The office building is required a 15-foot front, 0-foot side and rear yard setbacks. The submitted concept plan does indicate that they meet those required setbacks. They will be required roughly 19 spaces. They are showing roughly 26 spaces on their concept plan. They have identified that they are pushing the building adjacent to Minnesota Avenue and as far away as they possibly can from existing residential uses to the northeast and to the southeast of this property. A level B buffer yard will be required along the north and east property line. This does include a 15-foot setback, 2-foot berm, or 4-foot fence, and roughly 30 units of landscaping per 100 lineal feet. The proposed office building is designed utilizing modern architecture, which does not include the pitched roofs or brick siding, similar to the existing single-family homes within Grand Prairie and Prairie Green residential neighborhoods to the southeast and to the east. However, the applicant has worked to mitigate the differences in appearance by placing this building and parking adjacent to South Minnesota Avenue and roughly 200 feet from any existing single-family house, and that is currently the property to the north that is outside of city limits. And this should mitigate any incompatibilities with this proposed use to those existing single-family houses. If the conditional use permit is approved, the applicant can construct a building without a pitched roof or brick siding, similar to the one indicated in their picture. If the conditional use permit is denied, the lot would continue to be zoned O office, and they could construct a 2-story building with a maximum of 60,000 square feet or multiple 2-story buildings on this site, but they would have to have the required pitched roof and brick siding. Because the application has provided a clarity to indicate the location, nature, and extent of the work proposed, and the applicant has provided that additional separation distance from the proposed office to those existing single-family uses, to the north and to the east. Staff does recommend approval of this conditional use permit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions for staff?
No.
Thank you, Jason. Is the applicant here this evening? Good evening.
Good evening, Raquel Blount with Lloyd Companies, 101 South Reed Street. And I am here this evening to answer any questions on the building or this item. And we also have the architect for the project here in the audience today. So out of Sioux City, and he's happy to address any questions or concerns.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the architect present? I appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak regarding item number 17?
Yes, I'm Roger Lamp. I'm the resident just north of this proposed site. First off, I have absolutely no problem with the law office being next to me. I think it's a great use for this property. I would just hope that, I don't know who owns it now, and if they've actually closed on this, that they would mow it sometime, because I think the city's got requirements for height of weeds and all of that, so that's just, I'm just a sidelight to what's really happening here. The only other thing that I think, I mean, I'm in the construction steel business for 58 years, so I've seen tons of this kind of stuff. But I do believe this design don't fit the neighborhood. I just would like to see them alter it in some fashion that would fit. Even the buildings across the street are sloped roofs. They've got 412, 612 slopes. The office buildings across the street are that way. Every place out in that neighborhood, I've been there at that site for 47 years. All of this was slough and fields and everything else. I've seen it all come, and it's all been good. I have no problem with any of it. It's just that I don't believe this particular design fits this. And there's things they can do without totally changing this to make it more neighborhood friendly. That'd be my main concern. And as far as the business being there, I have no problem with that. I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have, but I'm just the old resident.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr., was it Lamp or Lamb?
Roger Lamp, like the light.
Lamp. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Lamp.
Mhm.
Any questions, commissioners? Very
Thank
good.
you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Lamp. Would the applicant like to jump up here quickly just to address some of the condition or the questions Mr. Lamp had?
Nathan Kalaher, architect with Plan Architecture, resident of Dakota Dunes, South Dakota. Thank you, Roger, for your, Mr. Lamp, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The primary reasons that we're here today are for what I would call the aesthetics, the pitched roof and the exterior skin material not being masonry. To that end, I think it's fair to say that the owner has a wish for something a little bit more on the contemporary side. We've tried to site the facility in such a way that that impact is as minimal as it gets. And that's the aesthetic, I guess, that they're looking for. I can say that the materials and the form of the building are of high quality, and great in terms of aging. In terms of the aesthetic, it's the aesthetic that the owner is looking for. And I guess personally, I believe that a little bit of variety is a good thing, certainly. There are actually a couple what I would call flatter roof, facilities nearby, but certainly I don't think there's one quite this modern. If you think like the Jimmy John's facility down a couple blocks, but certainly I think that the thing to weigh is, you know, if you look at it as a bullet point list, is how is this facility on the site versus another potential facility on the site? How is this user versus another potential user? And just kind of go down the bullets to weigh the decision. I will leave, I guess, the appropriateness of the facility to you, of course. I know that the owner is very excited about being in the development. I know that a number of her clients are in the adjacent neighborhood, so that's been something that she's been looking forward to, the developer. And if you have any questions in particular beyond that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, any other questions for petitioners here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamp, I don't know if that addressed your questions at all. That's kind of why they're here, to request the conditions. So, is there anyone else that would like to speak regarding item number 17?
My name is Dave Nordland, and I live at 304 West La Quinta Circle, which is directly northeast of this proposed development by the law firm. I, too, am pleased to see this law firm come in there. I've lived there for almost 18 years, and going into the 18th year was the first house in there. If you look at the picture that's being proposed here, that pond that you see, that's a 1-acre pond, and we have about 23 acres of common area there with 2 ponds. There's a kidney-shaped 2.5-acre pond that's further north on the north side of Roger Lamp's home. Our main concern as homeowners in that HOA there's 27 homes in there, is taking care of the property, especially those ponds. They're very, they require a lot of attention as far as aeration goes and keeping them clean. And watching the runoff, they actually are, as you know, detention ponds that the city required to be able to do the home development in that area. That 1-acre pond that is directly south of my home is 15 feet deep. And over the years that I've lived there, we've never had low water. So our main concern has been, since we have seen this development come in, and over the years, we've talked about what will the impact be to the environment on our 1-acre pond, and we're concerned about the water runoff. There are natural springs that are on the west side of that pond and on the east side of the pond and on the south side of the pond that keep that pond full of water. And when we have a winter runoff, when that is a little bit less than 2 acres, this development here, that water that runs off of that comes directly into our pond, winter and summer. And I know that the city has changed some of the storm sewer requirements, and that we're draining that pond water now that we have behind my home into the big pond and off into Prairie Green Golf Course. That's how it flows, outflow. It goes down to this Big Sioux River. So our concerns are going to be what will be the environmental impact to our quality of our pond and our common area. So we want to work with the development group here to make sure that is considered as one of the top priorities. Also, the property line landscape concerns that are on the east side of the property. Right now, there's a fence line that runs through there, and there's a lot of vegetation, and it's going to have to, of course, be cleaned up. We're looking forward to having that landscape done to improve the look that we have, not only for them looking into the pond and to the east, but for us to be able to enjoy the property that they developed there. Now, as far as the roof design and the exterior masonry goes, I have no particular concerns with that, except I do agree with Roger that I think it could be a little more conducive to the type of design that the rest of the neighborhood has. If you go into Grand Prairie, you'll notice that the peaked roofs, there's nothing flat. We have nothing in that area that's got a flat roof, or that is, this is a little bit stark in my view, a little stark for the neighborhood. So I'd like to see some kind of maybe a peaked roof on part of it, or a little more, if you would, a little more flair to it. And that, again, we would like to be able to work with the developer on that. My neighbor, there's two neighbors that are not here tonight that abut to, up to that pond. One is Ray and Marty Johnson, that is directly behind Roger's home to the east. And on the other side of me is Neil and Lori Landine, Dr. Landine. And they're concerned, too, with the particular concerns that I brought up here tonight, and they wanted me to express that from them. Other than that, we're looking forward to this. It's been a long time coming, and we're looking forward to having that as part of our beautification in the neighborhood. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wortland. Any other comments from the audience on item number 17?
Hi, my name is Michelle Lounsbury. I live at 112 West 77th Street. I am actually a resident of the Grand Prairie. So I live just south on 77th, probably about 2 blocks from this location. My husband is a physician at Sanford. We have lived in our home for 8 years. I am an attorney, and I work for Gina Guzman and the Guzman Law Firm. I currently office out of my house because our offices on 57th Street are bulging at the seams. We are right back in that the older house used to be a photography shop. I put my name out to our homeowners association earlier today to answer any questions, and I have received several emails and texts and phone calls about concern about the design of the building. But I do caution folks too that I think 7 of the most dangerous words we can ever utter are "we have always done it that way." Right? So although this design is different, even in the Grand Prairie, if you drive through, you will see yellow doors, and you do see new architecture coming into our development. For me, this is a great use of that land. One, I can walk there, so I do have a personal interest. But this piece of property could be used for larger, bigger things, creating more traffic and more congestion to the area. I also have to remind folks that I have a Walmart at 85th and Minnesota. So nothing above a mini Walmart would make me upset. So, and I was wondering earlier today whether that much discussion went on when the Walmart went in at 85th and Walmart, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I just want to voice my opinion that this is a professional law office with professional clients. Gina does not currently do criminal law. They are all Fortune 500 companies or business clients, estate clients, trust clients, those types of things. Most of the time her clients aren't even visiting her office. If we have 2 visitors a day at the 57th location, I would say that is a very busy day for our law office. Most of it is done through email, telephone, and that type of medium. So this would be very low impact to the current community. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions, commissioners? Thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience would like to address item number 16? Yes, sir.
I'm John Stratman, 325 West La Quinta Circle. I'm in the HOA that abuts up to this property. Frankly, we're pretty fortunate that something like this is going in there because we've wondered for years what the outcome would be. You know, is it going to be not a mini Walmart, but we did wonder, you know, is it going to be a convenience store, a get and go, or Lord only knows what. But this particular use of the property, we have no argument with. David talked earlier about the impact on our pond, and that's a concern. And I know that the city engineering department does a study on that, but I'm not sure what the mechanism is for us to be notified of that. We have no argument with the building, the use, while the architecture is a departure from a lot of things in that neighborhood. You know, 20 years from now, that might be the hot ticket. And the rest of us might look like ancient architecture, but we'd just like to be sure that we have an opportunity to have some input, or at least notification of when that engineering study for the runoff is done, so that we can protect the integrity of our pond.
Sure. Real quick, I can address that one. It's with the issuance of a building permit, that signifies that they have submitted an acceptable drainage mitigation plan through the city's engineering office. They have to do that before they can get a building permit.
But do they have to notify the homeowners?
No, because it's part of their getting a building permit process. So if you don't see a building permit issued, they didn't do it. If you do, they did. Your notification's built in.
Would the homeowners have any opportunity to at least be notified of what the city engineers, I mean, with all due respect, engineers do a wonderful job, but buildings do collapse, freeways collapse, and they were all done by engineers. And runoff is important to us. It just is.
Mr. Chair, can I interject a little bit, because this conditional use is about the flat roof and the non-brick, that maybe this is a conversation that could be had with staff after the meeting, because it doesn't enter into the decision that we're making here at all?
That's fair enough.
Just in appreciation of people's time, if you're okay with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stratman. Is there anyone else that would like to speak regarding item number 17 from the public? You've had your opportunity to present as the applicant. If we call you back up, you'd be more than welcome to answer any questions, but I think we're good with the initial presentation. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is John Skorhaug. I live at the Lakes at Prairie Green, 312 West Devitt. And my concern has already been discussed here. It has to, and the issue is, as correctly stated, about the lack of sloped roof and exterior masonry. The buildings that are office buildings, they're all office buildings on the west side of Minnesota Avenue. They're all are in compliance with that requirement. And most of the properties on the east side, where this building would be, are residential, and they have sloped roofs as well. So I don't know where if this project would just be off, if the requirement was applied to them as well, or what the situation is. But it seems like it would be great if they could have a structure that would include those things that everybody else has complied with.
Correct. That's the spirit of why they're here, sir, this evening, is to request a conditional use to vary from that design. So,
if I might, the one other thing, it's on 77th Street and Minnesota Avenue. 77th Street is the entrance to the Grand Prairie development, and it's my impression that there is a lady here from the Grand Prairie, but she is on the inside on this. I mean, she's working for the people that would occupy the building, is my understanding. I guess I understood that correctly. What I'm wondering is, now I talked with Mr. Lemmy, who is the owner or one of the owners of the development, and he referred me to his property manager. This was yesterday, and neither of them were aware of the proposal, nor had heard anything about any sort of meeting that would inform their residents about this. So I don't know whether they are supposed to be informed so they can, arrive at their own opinions about the suitability of this. It is, after all, at the entrance of their development, so their homes.
Sure. That's why you're here as well. You saw the notices.
Well,
That was
we received a notice at the Lakes of Prairie Green. Apparently, it came to the secretary of the Homeowners Association, and she distributed that information to those that she could reach. But and we did have a meeting, a neighborhood meeting, which involved primarily those of us in the Lakes of Prairie Green on the 26th of June. But apparently that information didn't get to the Grand Prairie, which is actually more directly affected by this. So unless there are other questions, you're looking like you've had it for today.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Could staff come up real quick? Hey, Jason, please state for the record and for everyone's edification here, the proper notice was posted regarding this meeting.
The signs were posted, it was published in the paper, and anybody within this black circle received a letter. I know the applicant did reach out to one of the neighborhood associations and did have a neighborhood meeting.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions for staff while he was up? Thank you. All right. Any other comments regarding item number 17? Yes, sir.
I'm Darrell Drew. I live at 300 East 77th in Grand Prairie. And I just have a couple of things. I understand that they just want to have a flat roof and all metal on the whole building, is the way I understand this. I was hoping that there would be a little continuity in our area as far as pitch roofs go and as far as some kind of masonry, different types of siding. Combination of metal to me is fine. Law office is fine. The location's fine. I would just like to see a little more continuity of the design of the building for the area that it's going. To be more pleasant for everybody, and even on the west side of the street, on the south side of the street, east, west, we all have masonry buildings with pitched roofs. So if there's some way they could maybe put a pitched roof, whether it's shingles or standing seam on the big area or the little area, to meet us a little ways, and then some kind of accents on the walls. I think a little combination of the whole thing would make the building look much better. That's all I got.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Drew? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
At this point, I'm going to close the floor to public testimony, and I'm going to look for commission action regarding item number 17.
Move approval.
Got a motion for approval of item number 17. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Discussion, please.
Well, as I look at this conditional use permit, the thing to always consider is, yes, there is a kind of a standard that we try to outline in these things with a pitched roof, masonry. But the reason we have a conditional use permit process is to allow things that deviate from that. When it makes sense for the landowner, the designer, any of those kinds of things. And so, in my opinion, the designer did a pretty good job of getting this as far away from those other sensitive residential areas as possible. With the addition of buffer yards and those kinds of things, I think they did a pretty nice job of trying to mitigate any effects that might be impacted by this, and by putting the kind of the grand gesture of the concept to the south and getting it away from that neighborhood. I think it does a pretty good job of mitigating all of that. So I'm in support of this. I think deviating from that particular concept is all about why this particular owner would like to see something a little bit different. So in this case, it makes sense to me.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second for approval of item number 17. All in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Item number 17 is approved.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
And a second? All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Didn't think it. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.